working on an Suzuki LT125 Quadrunner carburetor. The machine will actually start and idle fine, but as soon as I give it any gas, it dies out. So my guess is that this carburetor needs cleaned. So I'm not sure what the size of this is or anything like that. It looks like it's a Mikuni brand. Whatever came stock on it, I'm sure. This is an 84-ish Quadrunner again. So what we're going to do is a couple things. First of all, this line, if I can hold it up here, this was a vent line that had to come off, just a vent that goes out in case it overflows or needs air or something, but it didn't have anything attached to it. Is important. This here is the gas line that comes from the gas tank, and then there was another small line right here, which I'm guessing is supposed to be a drain line for when you unscrew this drain plug if you want to drain the bowl. So I started to pull the screw out before I started filming, so that was in, obviously. But we're gonna take the 4 screws off on the bottom here, just a Phillips head screwdriver. And once we get all 4 of these guys out, we will see what the inside looks like. See if it's gunked up, see if the float's stuck, see what the deal is. Again, I think the carburetor just needs cleaned. I'm guessing that the main jet is plugged. For me, the ATV would start and run, but as soon as I gave it any throttle at all, it would just die off. So either not getting enough fuel or not getting enough air. I checked, there's no air filter in it, of course, and there's no clog in the pipe that goes to the carburetor. So guessing it's a fuel related issue. Let's tear it apart and see. So we took those 4 screws out. Now we're going to take the bottom here off the bowl and see what this looks like. Should just come right off like this. And here's the inside. So this is the secondary jet, or probably the idle jet, and this is the main jet, which is probably what's clogged, which is why idle's fine and doesn't run. If you need to test your float, you can actually take this out and go just drop it in a bucket of water and make sure it floats. If not, you may need to replace this or try to solder or braze, or whatever the correct terminology is here for these. But if I looked under my bowl here, this thing is filthy. So that's the first thing we're doing, is clean this thing out, because that's not going to help us at all in the future. So we'll clean the bowl out while I've got it apart. I did buy a carb rebuild kit, so I may just rebuild it while I've got it apart here. But again, here's your gasket between the upper part of the carb and lower part of the carb. You have to be careful. There's a little shut-off valve, which it won't go into focus probably, but right in here, that's what shuts the fuel off. So just be careful. If you take this float apart, there is usually a little pin in every carburetor I've ever taken apart on small motorcycles like this. So there's a pin right here. You drive this pin out, this float will come off, and then there'll be that shut off will be right in there if you're going to take this all the way apart. But I don't think I need to take it all the way apart. It looks relatively clean in here. Again, I'm going to take this main jet out and discover that. So let me grab a flathead screwdriver, which I've got right here, and I doubt I'm going to be able to do this. Let's try. Maybe. There we go. Okay, let's take this main jet out and check it out, but I'm sure this is the problem. And you should be able to see through it, and I can't. Let me hold up to my eye and look. Nothing. So I'm sure this is our problem. This is gotta be why it idles fine but won't run. One thing you can do, if you don't have a rebuild kit, you can take a piece of really thin wire and run it down here. You know, paper clip's way too big. I mean, I'm talking like a strand of wire, and you can clean this out. So I'm gonna hit it with some carb cleaner and see if I can run a piece of wire through it. It's not gonna focus probably that close, but you can't see any light through it. If I hold up to the light bench on the bench here, you can't see any light through it. It's definitely the problem. So yeah, let's go ahead and clean this out, and I'll be right back. So before I actually clean it out, I just blew on it with my mouth, and you can see a little bit of light through there, but there's still crap in there. So that's what I mean. If that's clogged, it's never gonna run. So again, this is super hard to get to focus because it's such a small thing, but you can see it right there. There's a little bit of light. That's why we need to clean this out. So if you have an old Ethernet cable laying around, or own phone cable, this is an Ethernet cable, but this actually worked really well. I took a piece of cable that I had from an Ethernet line that I had run out here in the garage in the shop, and there. I mean, it was the exact size for this specific jet on this one. So I just shoved it down in there a couple times to clean it out, and now if we look through, way better. This thing should probably run just fine now. So all we're gonna do is so I'm gonna spray this while I've got it apart and clean this carburetor up. There's no reason why not to clean it, but they'll screw this main jet back into there. Again, we're gonna clean out the bottom of this bowl since it's got a bunch of crap in it, and while I got it apart, put the gasket back on and reassemble it. We'll probably try to run that piece of wire down the idle jet too while I've got it here, and then we'll put this thing back together and see if it works. All right. So we're going to screw this back in now that everything's cleaned out. So again, you can see I just cleaned it off. Everything's just clean. Trying to put it back together as clean as possible. And you can see this is cleaned out now. So we want to make sure that this is on there and that it's tight. I don't know if there's probably an exact torque spec if you look in the owner's manual or in the shop manual, but just snug. That's put back together. And this has to go back on here somehow. So probably something like that, since that's how the holes line up. And it's bubbled up a little bit. So again, in reality, I think I have a carb rebuild kit over here in a pile of stuff that I brought out to the shop that I'd ordered on Amazon. So if it leaks, I'll put it back together with the carb rebuild kit, but for now I'm not going to. We'll set this guy back on here gently. Put it back together like so. Okay. And now, make sure everything looks right. Looks pretty good. We will put the screws back in. So pop these 4 screws we got back in and then hook it back up and see how it runs. So as I'm putting this back in, I wanted to make sure I showed you this. This is a little breather tube that it had on it. It was a little bit longer, but it had like melted shut, so I cut it so that it actually worked. This is that little tiny drain line I was telling you about. And then this is the gas line that comes from, if you were to look in here, from that petcock there. That petcock will allow you to turn it from on, off, to reserve, to that kind of thing for fuel. So that fuel line is going to go right onto the bottom here of the carburetor, and then we're going to put the choke cable back in. The choke cable will go right in this one, and then the throttle needle will go inside this one. So let's get this mounted, and then I'll show you how to put those back together. I realized I didn't show you guys how I took this apart, so may as well just show you how it goes back together, and you can figure it out from the reverse. So all the lines are hooked up. Now we got to just connect it back to the air intake tube here, and then into the actual cylinder here. So that happens by just bringing this up. And if we can figure out how to do this, just like that. So it's into the back one. I guess it doesn't truly matter which one you do first, but probably easiest to do the back one first because it's flexible. And then twist and rotate it in. I want to make sure this is on tight. But now that that's on, you'll see there's a little clamp right here. It's a Phillips head screwdriver. So we'll take the Phillips head screwdriver and tighten this up. We'll make sure that this is seated all the way. So you want to make sure this is seated all the way. And then we'll spin this clamp to where it's easy to get to, like that, and tighten it up. So let me do that real quick, and I'll show you how to put the choke and throttle back in. Those are tightened up now. So we're gonna put this choke back in. So the choke, when it goes down in there, I'm guessing this is like if you had a manual choke, but I had to pull out on this in order for this to for it to come out. So I'm guessing, yep, you have to pull. It has to be out in order, or away from the center, in order for you to put it back in. So we're just gonna tighten this thing back down. Which is impossible for you to see me doing. Okay, that's back on, and that's a 14mm wrench to tighten that back up. Again, there's probably a true torque spec, but just snug, more than enough. And then this is the throttle. So if you look at this, this has a long slot and then a fat narrow slot. If you look down into this tube, which is really hard to see down in there, but on the far side here is a thin needle, and on this side is a thicker needle. So the thick side goes on this one, like this, and then the thin side is on this side because that's how it goes down in. So this will just slide down in like so, and you just have to maybe turn it back and forth a little bit till it sits down in like that, and then screw this on. And once we do that, we'll try to start it. Probably a good idea to show you this as well. If you need to adjust the needle height. So I was messing with this before I took the carburetor off, just hoping it would be something easier to get to than ripping the whole carburetor out, which again isn't more than a 5-minute job. But you can take this off and adjust the height of the throttle, how much gas you get. The easiest way to do that is to pull back on the spring. So let's see if we can do this. Nope, not going to do it one-handed. All right, hold on. Okay, got the spring held back. Now you pull this wire out the long slot that it's in, and you can get this wire out of here, and you'll see there's a little end on the wire that keeps it in there. So we're just gonna mess with this, which is gonna be darn near impossible to do one-handed. So again, this wire will just slide out the bottom. Let me do that. Give me 1 second here. Okay, and then once you have the wire out, this is where you'll be at. So inside here, you have to be careful. There's a little piece of metal that's like a shape of a W. So if you just push down on this, it'll come out in your hand like that. It's a spring. And then you have the needle. And then on the needle, you'll see a little retaining clip and then notches. So again, it's probably supposed to be in the middle. I was just messing with it. I put it on the bottom one. I'm putting it back in the middle before I try to start it up here. So we'll start it up. We'll put the needle back into the into its seat there. We'll set this spring back in there, and then we'll hook it back up to the throttle cable and screw it on and try to start it. One thing I forgot to mention, I think, I'm not 100% positive, but I think this is a prime. So I think if you pull this a few times, it'll prime your bowl. Because I noticed when I did this last time, gas comes out eventually and drips down. So I'm pretty positive that this is a priming. See how the gas is coming out now? So I think this helps prime the bowl. So I could be mistaken, but if you're working on a LT125, you know, it's worth a shot. So okay, let's see if it starts. And make sure it's on. Probably don't need to choke because it was running earlier. A little bit of gas. Let's try the choke. Well, let's see. Let's grab some starting fluid here. Magic sauce. Should be more than enough. Well, yeah, never that easy, right? Let's try a little more sauce. Did I turn the gas back on? It's in reserve now. Well, maybe it's in reserve now. I'm not sure which way. I think it's in reserve. Now it's in full. No, it's got gas because I tested that. I know we've got gas coming to it. So let's just keep trying it here. Oh, look at that. All right, well, that's a good example of something that I can show you too. If your rope doesn't get any traction, just tap it. Because the springs are not coming out. Well, let me pause it here, and so I can do two hands, one on the throttle and one on the pull rope. So, I swear it was two more pulls after I turned it off. Just pushed the choke in. But now, we're idling and running. See what happens when we give it gas. Perfect. It would not do that last time. So, okay, that's how you clean your carburetor on a Quadrunner LT125. And yeah, it just needed to get some gas into the bowl, which is why it wasn't starting, but now it's got gas in there, it's working. So take it out for a ride. Thanks for watching.